that's true. Naked Palpatine.
Oh, you pick that one. Fresh out of the clone tank, nude Palpatine is my
Well, that's the first thing I think of when you say Dark Empire Palpatine. Hello, everybody. I don't know how to get into this. We have The Darkness That Came Before. The first book in the Prince of Nothing series by R. Scott Bakker. I don't know how you say the last name. I don't know if I can recommend this to you. It is not going to be for everyone. A lot of people will not be able to stomach it, and I'm not saying that because you're lesser or something. It's just genuinely, what are you comfortable with? And I hear it only gets worse. I don't know. Haven't read it yet. While reading this book, I wasn't having fun. I wasn't, sorry, there's a lot of ants right now. I wasn't. Am I glad I read it? Mm-hmm. I was so engaged with this book. The prose are exquisite. The characters are massively engaging. I don't like a single one of them, though. Morally. They're all kind of nebulous in their behavior. It's only going to get worse here. But there's some captivating moments with these people. I'm just trying to properly... I think especially if you're a woman, this might be a bit harder to get into. Not that you can't. I'm sure there are plenty of women that are fans of this series. But there is such a strong lack of agency for women in this particular book. I don't know if that changes later. As far as it goes to this first book, I mean, we have a pedo in terms of woman. And then we have women that don't really have... I mean, they have character, but they don't have much agency. I don't know what to say beyond that other than... a lot of horrible things happen to women here. And in the real life, a lot of horrible stuff happens to women too, and that's part of the point. It's part of... you're meant to feel uncomfortable. But also, there's a point, because if you think about the first book of Game of Thrones, it was a Song of Ice and Fire series. Lots of terrible stuff happens to women in that series too, but even in that very first book, there's a promise of certain women being something more. In this book alone, I don't see a single thing providing that. Now, I hear stuff changes later on, but even still, as far as this book is concerned, if you read this in a vacuum, there is no promise whatsoever that any woman is going to be anything more than what they are in this particular book. Like, Daenerys in Song of Ice and Fire, she's forced to get married to this, and she's mistreated, but at the end of it all, we still have that promise that she's going to be something far more. This world is not a happy place, and everybody's kind of morally dubious at best, and nobody's a pillar of virtue. I don't know, you could very much classify anyone as a good person. Now, the overall plot, a holy war is announced, and so the world is going to war. However, we don't really get to see any of that. Um, but it's pretty much just set up for that as we get introduced to different people, different factions before the war begins, essentially. I mean, it's kind of already began, but it's not like the war is not the focal point of this particular book. It is more so getting introduced to the world and the characters. So, sorry, lots of ants. Quite ridiculous. I'm trying to find a good way to move on, and I can't recommend it. What I can say is if you decide to read it, you may find a new favorite. If you are a big fan of Game of Thrones and you said that's not dark enough. If you're a Malazan, Book of the Fallen by Steven Erikson, read Dead House Gates, read Dust of Dreams, and decided, or Memories of Ice, and you go, oh, right, and Reaper's Gale, because there's a lot of stuff in there, right? If you read those books and you say, you know what, that's not dark enough, then this may be exactly the series that you're looking for. I'm very much looking forward to reading book 2. I'm glad I read this. It challenged me. It made me, a bit uncomfortable at times, but it was a solid, really amazing experience. I can't, like I said, I'm not saying that I was having a great time reading it. Just like nobody has a really great time reading Schindler's List, but it was such a Bakker has such a way with words where oftentimes certain dialogue, like with a character named Kunar, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but we'll get to that in spoilers. But he is so compelling sometimes. Same with the character of Kellis, or Akemian. There's so many fantastic moments of just dialogue alone that has you utterly entranced in what's happening. I'm not. I'm loving the prose and I'm loving the story, but I'm not exactly enjoying myself. But that's not a negative. It's just not a fun place to be. I also got an exact sort of epiphany going through this book, but I'll wait for the end of the trilogy to confirm my epiphany. So I'll leave you with that little tantalizing thing because I sort of have a big thought that crossed my mind that I want to get across to people, but I want to save it till the end of at least this original trilogy before I make that epiphany known. But I thought it was quite interesting, and definitely not what the author intended necessarily, but it's something that from my perspective, it really made me go, oh, this is what this reminds me of. But that's a little teaser. I'll save that for you. Um, what else can I say? Non-spoiler wise. Like I said, a lot of it is talking. Um, there's a lot of stuff that, again, you probably won't understand until a reread. I certainly don't. Um, and just a lot of world building, a lot of character moments. They talk about a war, but it's really in the background. It's not. It's not going to matter till later. Um, if you're looking for big themes of religion and the exploration of, at least again, as this first book is concerned, despite the fact that we're dealing with a holy war, we don't really deal with religion itself and how people come to faith or what makes people believe or any of the stuff. If you're looking for that, you won't find it here. Um, Again, other people have done this series better justice than I ever will. I don't recommend it. I can't. I can't. But if you end up reading it yourself, if you vibe with it, if you're into it, you're really gonna be into it. And it really just comes down to, is the prose, is the story enough that you're sitting there burning through, regardless of how uncomfortable you may or may not be? Or do you put it down? And either way is valid. I don't think there's anything wrong with you for doing so. But that's, non-spoiler wise, that's my thoughts on book one, The Darkness That Came Before. And if you've read it, of course, I want to know what you think in the comment section below. And let's have a dialogue going. I'm going to get into spoilers now. If you don't want any spoilers whatsoever, you want to go into it completely blind, now's the time to go. I'll say this series as a whole, I don't think the first book really dives into it too much, but there's definitely an exploration of free will, whether or not we have it, the nature of man, the nature of people, and in terms of redemption and stuff, doesn't seem like we have any hope of that. But again, the series isn't over. So we'll see what happens in The Warrior Prophet. I am looking forward to reading it. And we'll talk to you then. If you don't want spoilers, there's the door. So, we start with the Citadel of Ashal. We hear things about this no god. Don't really know what that means. Anasarambar the second is the high king of this area. Kuniri, I also wrote that down, don't know what that meant at the time. I was also a bit confused on this section. A bard assaults a child sexually. The child murders said bard. This is where we hear about the Benyuane, or Dunyain, one or the other. One of the first quotable lines in the entire book. So long as men live, there are crimes. We meet Kellis and Lewis. Now, the thing about Kellis, I'm not exactly positive on his things here, but he has the ability to basically read people extremely well. And because of that, he can manipulate people. So again, is he a good guy? I don't know. I don't know the guy. What I do know is that he's heavily manipulative, and that inherently makes him seem rather untrustworthy. He will get his ends done the way he wants to by using you. And he can read you well enough to get you to basically be totally worshipped to him, / devoted, loyal to him. By just having honest conversations. Honest. And you will be entranced. The big thing also about this book that I forgot to mention on spoiler, I probably should have, is Kellis is searching for his father. Anasarambar Moangus. We also learn about the city of Shemai. Also Kataya people, dark-skinned, I just wrote that down. And Rithi, who are followers of the latter prophet Enri. We also have Kellis versus the No Man, which, again, I was confused about at first. There is a YouTube channel, I'll leave a link in the description, that uses AI art and basically has done a summary for the entire first book of this series, and also is started work on the second book. And so, as a refresher, it definitely helped going to those. I wouldn't use it as a replacement for the book, but it definitely provides some nice recap if you, especially if you're going to do a review. But yeah, so there's a couple things in just this prologue alone, from Kellis looking for his father, from him showing this manipulation that he has, to this sort of like bat, I don't know, weird creature thing that attacks him, and then the No Man, which are like these humans that are a bit insane, and goes and attacks Kellis. And then we move on to book one, The Sorcerer. This is where we meet, well, first we hear about the High Anon Nation. We learn about the Gashrani. We meet the kind of the main character, sort of, the sorcerer Akimian. We learn about the Scarlet Spires, who are powerful schools in the three C's. Again, like I said, a lot of world building. It is very much doesn't hold your hand. Do I think it's as hard as Malazan Book of the Fallen? Not really. I think getting into the world is a bit easier here. But those early chapters are extremely hard, as they just kind of keep throwing names and stuff at you. So I just try to get everything I can to make sure I know what's going on. Geshruni, captain of warrior slaves. I don't remember that, but I wrote that down. Um, there's this thing, the chore. There's these trinkets you can have that essentially make you immune to sorcery when worn. So, because Akimian goes to meet this guy, and he's talking to him, and he can't use Akimian can't use any magic because he's wearing that. After the meeting between Akimian, he goes and leaves. He's walking out in this dark alley, and again, we don't really have an answer to this that I'm aware of, unless I missed something. But this fat, chubby guy, bald, comes out, assaults Geshruni, and he says a lot of cryptic things. He says he is so much more than human. He's beautiful, and harms him. And again, I don't even know if that was. I don't think that's resolved in this book. I think that's just a loose thread. But he hurts Geshruni, and then that's kind of the end of that. We learn about Atursis, the citadel of the school of mandate. Apologies. Meet a character named Nazora, an old sorcerer. He has a meeting with Akimian, and they bring up this person named Anru, who is Akimian's former student, who dropped out of the School of Mandate to become a religious priest for this other sect that I forget. And the School of Mandate is the oldest thing. We're going to hear terms of the consult. And again, I'm not exactly sure even still what that means. We're only on book 1. I may have missed stuff. I'm not the smartest cookie in the shed, but I know that will come back later. But they're one of the oldest factions in this world, and they used to be highly respected. They used to be very powerful. But now most people kind of just hand wave them away as conspiracy nuts, and they don't really trust them. But it's sort of like a cult in that sense, where it's very hard to get in. The initiation process is a bit difficult, but once you're in, there's no real getting out. So when Akimian basically lets Onro go free, that's a big no-no. And he thought no one knew about it, but they do know good and well, because they want him to go and talk to Onro to get information. This is also where we learn about Esmenet, who is a prostitute. And again, there's not a single moral character in this series. I say she is pretty innocent. She hasn't done anything wrong. She is a prostitute. Does she take enjoyment in her job? I suppose she does at times. She does what she has to survive in this world. But we learn her daughter died 6 years prior to like a sickness or something. And so she's a bit on the older side, and she gets insecure about that at times, like how people will often choose the younger prostitutes over her. But not Akimian, because they have this sort of weird relationship, Akimian and her have. So they're not exactly a couple, they're not married, but they do have this sort of beyond just physical relationship with each other to an extent. We also meet a Shariel Knight, again, some other things that's not fully explained, with Sarcellus. We'll meet him again later. Mathenite, the guy who's kind of leading this this whole holy war that's initially started it. We don't know a lot about him, but he wants to take Shammai, which is another. Shammai, if I'm not mistaken, is a bit like Constantinople, if I had to make a guess. It's a really big like city, if I'm not mistaken. So there's a really cool part where the Achaemen's, undercover, he's trying to see this whole gathering of these followers of Mathenite, and he's sitting there, and the Mathenite basically he goes straight to Achaemen and politely goes, "You need to leave. You're not welcome here." But doesn't harm him, lets him leave. And it terrifies Achaemen because only the people from the School of Mandate should be able to recognize one another. And yet the Mathenite, who seemingly has nothing to do with the School of Mandate, has. And then we move on to part 2, the Emperor. We meet Xerius, who's the Emperor, and his helpful assistant, Skyos, an older man who's terrified of Xerius. We'll talk about that at the end. Also meet a character named Lord Calminius, Empress of Nansur. We get mentions of that. Zenimus. I'm naming off names because that's what I did when I saw these names in the book. Akasharian are another sort of magic people. They're described as bald, and the way they're described, it kind of reminds me of like a monk, which kind of made me feel like these characters are kind of like Avatar: The Last Airbender, but no arrow on their bald head. We also get introduced to Kunair, or Newer. I don't know how you pronounce this name, but he is essentially. It's funny how this keeps happening. Started Discworld, and in Discworld, we have a old man variant of Conan the Barbarian. We have Karsa Orlong in the Book of the Fallen, and we have Kunair, or Kunar, however you pronounce his name, in this series as well, who very much seems to fill a similar function. But this guy, I mean, is he one of the most fascinating parts of the book? Absolutely. Does he make Karsa seem tame? Also, kinda. Not in terms of strength. I not to pit two fantasy series against each other, but Karsa's kicking the ever living crap out of Kunair if they ever squared up. But in terms of hard to like Karsa, he's raped a bunch of women. Compared to Kunair, Karsa's kind of a saint. Kunair kills his uncle, who calls him a gay slur. At first, I thought maybe Kunair had some relations with the male, but I don't know if the book really supports that, because it doesn't really talk about that too much. I don't know. But anyway, his uncle is dead. Magic is terrifying. It's used once, because again, these are almost said the Large, but that's Philip Chase. This is what are the people called? I know he talks about it a lot. I'm blanking on the name right now of these people. Frick. I didn't write it down on this page. I had to write it somewhere. I'm not going to keep this series going forever by not. We'll get back to it. But basically, his people are a bit more on the tribal side. They have a very strict way about them. But anyway, they have mages show up to attack them in this section. And again, there's only a few of them. They start casting fire and stuff, and magic is terrifying in this world. I also got another quote for you. Answers are like opium. The more you imbibe, the more you need. Which is why the sober man finds solace in mystery. We meet the Exalt General Comphis, who also is the nephew to the Emperor. We have a flashback to when Cunair, when his father was killed by Anasarimbor Moangus. So, Callus's father, the character we met at the opening of this book, had interactions with Cunair's father. So there's some interesting connections already being formed there. And then we also meet Istra, who is the mother to the Emperor. And we see her flirting with her grandson, Comphis. We also learn just a little bit later on, because, you have the Emperor being extremely antagonistic toward his own mother, calling her just horrible things, but then we also find out in this particular section, not that it necessarily makes it okay on the Emperor's part, but then again, can I really blame the guy? Because as the Emperor was growing up, as a little boy, Istria would come into his room at night and rape her own son. Now, I know that's a bit scary word to say on here. I might have just demonetized myself. I'm not getting paid anyway. Hopefully the video don't get taken down. Could have used another word, but I just had to say that pretty bluntly, because as I said, there's not a single good person in this series, or at least in this book. Probably the closest we can come to, again, is Esmenet, because she doesn't really do anything explicitly wrong, as far as I can tell. And Cunair goes and murders a bunch of women and children. Skaios tries to trick Comphis as he wished to avoid. As he wished to avoid Holy War. Remember, Skaios tries to trick Comphis into getting an argument with his uncle, which does not succeed. Now, Skaios claims it's to avoid a holy war, which he does not want. Certain revelations by the end of this book, I don't know if that was really the reasoning. We move on to part 3, the Harlot. At this point, man, I genuinely, do we need the detail? I don't know. But so at first I thought it was a demon. Later on, I think it's explained that it was like another sect of people, the Kishorium maybe. I don't remember. I know they said it. I know they explained it. I try to block it out, to be honest. But basically, some guy comes in to meet up with Esmenet, and starts getting a little rough. They start doing stuff, and it's just a lot. It's just a lot. He pays for her services. She is a prostitute. They're doing the deed, but there's a certain. He's doing it with her. They're doing the funky wonky, and then he starts being a bit rougher about it, and he's trying to garner this information from her, and she's not providing it. So he's like giving her the best she's ever had, but she also doesn't want it, but she also does. I don't need this. It doesn't sit well in the heart and the soul and whatever you want to call it. It's just uncomfortable to read, but this is happening. And, finally she just confesses everything, because she's getting the best thing of her life, but she's also feels like she's being absolutely abused and used, and she doesn't actually want this, but she does. I don't know. It's just too much. It's too much. And by the end of it all, there's some black gunk left instead of what you would expect to be there after that act. So what's that all about? I don't know. I try to block it out. We're not going to keep talking about it anymore. It's that may be the point of no return for some of you in terms of this book, is that particular scene. So I thought I would mention it here. I'm not particularly happy to mention it. I'm not particularly happy to be talking about it. It is something that happened in the story, so there you go. I think that will be your make it or break it point, whether or not you can stomach through the rest. I don't know how I did it. I guess I just became numb. Zenimus, who again works for the Emperor, is apparently good friends with Achemian, and they reunite. Sarculus, or whatever the fudge his name is, we met him in the beginning. He interacted with Achemian. You also know Esmenet well, and at first it's like, Achemian doesn't love you, but I do. I'm here for you. But then we also get to be inside this guy's head, and he talks about imagining Esmenet's head severed as he what the actual F? Okay, I don't know. I don't know. Moving forward, we learn about the synthis architect demon. Maybe I don't know what's going on with that section, but we move to part 4, the warrior. We have a flashback to Kunair and Moangus. It was this flashback that led to Kunar's father's death, because Kunar interacts with Anasarimbar Moangus, and they have these conversations. His people have always had a certain way. They have always been about tradition. That is how Compass beat Kunar's, was through that. But that's in the future. In this flashback, they keep talking about how there's more than one possibility. There's different roads to be taken. And ultimately, it's this sort of pact that Kunar makes with Moangus that gets his father killed. Anasarimbar, Kellis, and Kunar meet in present day and ultimately join together. Because while he is no fan of this holy war, doesn't really care about it, doesn't really care about those people, doesn't even really care about Kellis, but the promise to kill Kellis' father is too much to pass up. Denuane, or the Denwain, surrender to Logos, reason, and intellect. Kunar, considering what he is, in order to get past and be a part of all this, he says he will pretend to be a convert. All of his people are gone. He's left alone, so why not go and pretend to be this convert? We also meet this lady named Swerve, or Swev, I don't know, it's Serwe. Shri? I don't know how I'm supposed to say the name. But he blames her for his murder. Basically, this boy sees them, because she joins at some point, I'm kind of forgetful. And this little boy comes upon them, and they can't allow anybody to know. So the little boy, she basically screams and warns the little boy. So because Kunar is like, hey, we're all pals here. Hey, you want some food? Come on by. He was gonna shake him in the neck, whatever. And she screamed out, she run. So him and Kellis are running after this kid. Finally, they catch up, and basically tries to blame her, like it's her fault that this kid's murdered. They were going to murder this kid regardless, so it's a little whore. Whore poopy. I don't appreciate that. Part 5, the Holy War. Kellis, a prince of nothing. Nobody knows much about that area he comes from, so he very much could be a prince of nothing. This is also where we kind of get a convergence of characters. I mean, we've had Kunair, we've had Kellis, but this is where all the characters like the sorcerer and the emperor and everyone they all kind of converge and meet here. Kellis and Achemian has an exchange. Super interesting. I might have wrote some down. I'll get my phone in a bit. So something I found interesting, and I don't know if this is genuine or not, because I'm not in Callus's head really to know. I don't know if it's genuine or deceit, or like Kilgrave. Now the reason I mentioned Kilgrave, and for those of you who don't know, a character in comics, but also if you've ever seen the former Netflix show, it's now on Disney Plus, but Jessica Jones, played by David Tennant, there's this character named Kilgrave. He was born, well, he wasn't born, but at a young age, he got these powers where basically anything he says people are compelled to do, they must do. There's a certain point where he's trying to confide in Jessica, and he tells her, like, you think it's easy for me? And she's like, oh yeah, it must be so hard getting everything you want. He goes, sure, but because of what I am, I can never know. I can never talk to someone and know whether they're talking to me because they want to or because I force them to or anything like that because of the nature of my power every time I open my mouth. So I don't know if with Kellis it's also a similar thing where like it's kind of just like it's a part of like his being, like he can't not read people and then use it, or if that's just a whole load of crap to get some sympathy. I don't know. Now this is near the end of the book. We get the mention that Skoyos was actually a Phanem Kasharim spy, which is a really cool ending because really cool near the end because he always acts like he's fearful of getting assaulted by the Emperor, but now he's here, he's menacing. That whole section was really cool. And then by the end of the book, I think Kellis got Swerves with, how did you say her name, pregnant? But he tells her that you matter, which is something that most of the women in this series, at least in this first book, don't have. They don't really feel, they have very low self-esteem in this series, or in this book. So clearly it's going to make her be very dependent upon him, and we'll see where it goes in the Warrior Prophet. But you know what? I thought I was going to hold it off till now, but it's something interesting I thought I would bring up. I'll bring it up again when I finish the series, or this original trilogy, to see if it still holds water by that point. But I thought it'd be an interesting thing to mention now from my perspective, because of course, as I always say, YouTube used to be and should be broadcast yourself, so I'm expressing myself. If you don't approve of that, that's okay, but hell. The Bible talks about that. A lot of people know about that, even if they don't read the Bible, because you got certain people that are screaming, you're going to hell. Repent, repent. All that stuff. Which, I mean, fair enough. But definitely, I think there are better ways to go about saying that to people. I bring up hell. If you listen to anybody, atheist, Christian, you often hear the same thing. Fire, brimstone, eternal torture chamber. I'm not exactly sure where people get this eternal torture chamber from. When Jesus, I have a point to this. Don't think I'm preaching to you. When Jesus speaks of hell, hold on. My point. I do have a point. And again, I don't think this is anything that R. Scott Baker had in mind. This is just something that came to me as I was going through it. And we'll see if it may hold true to me still by the end of it all. In the Bible, when Jesus speaks of hell, he calls it a lake of eternal fire. He also calls it a place of eternal darkness, which to me sounds like a contradiction, right? If there's eternal fire, then by definition it would be light. It's a metaphor. Jesus also says he's the door. I don't think much of us are expected to believe that he's a walking, talking door. I don't think that's what he even meant. The point is that it's meant to be a place you don't want to go. A terrible, awful, no good place. Hell is simply the absence of God. Now, again, this is all Christian belief, mythology. Don't believe it, that's fine. I have a point to make about this book. assuming it's true, you don't have to, but for the sake of argument, whether someone believes in God or not, or they worship something else, they go out their whole life not believing in the Christian God, in Yahweh, whatever. But they're still charitable. They're still kind. They're still gracious. They beat kindness as opposed to other Christians in so many ways. So many times the non-believers are more righteous than those that say they follow. There is goodness in every person. Christianity would argue that goodness comes from God. God watches over the earth. So even if you never acknowledge him, there is goodness in you. Now, the difference between hell and earth, God's here whether you acknowledge him or not. But if you spent your entire life never wanting anything to do with him, then you go to hell. You're not put there. You choose to be there. You go, I mean, wouldn't it be a certain sort of hell to be forced to be with someone that you wanted nothing to do with your entire life? Would that not be more evil? Like, I don't love you. I don't want to be with you. It'd be like a Joe Goldberg you situation. You're stuck, locked in the cage. So he respects your wishes. He respects your boundaries and stays away. But in hell, there is no God. So all the good parts of you cease to be. You are left with all your darkest, worst desires. Or maybe you're not a violent person. Not everybody would be a murderer without God. Absolutely. But you know what you do have? A lot of depression. A lot of self-loathing. Negative self-talk. And some people would be murderers, rapists, etc., etc., etc. So I say that to say that this first book at some point really made me think that in some way, this author, by accident, absolutely, this guy's not a religious, has crafted a fantasy setting that to me perfectly encapsulates what I assume hell to be. And that is my hypothesis. That is my game theory. That is my idea for this series. Will it hold water by the end of it all? I don't know. But in terms of what this first book made me feel, I don't think I've ever seen a better accidental representation of what hell will be, and it's this book. That's my thought for you today. I leave you though with this amazing quote by Cunard by the end of this book, which was, "Do not mistake me in Rithi. In this much compass is right. You are all staggering drunks to me, boys who would play at war when you should kennel with your mothers. You know nothing of war. War is dark, black as pitch. It is not a god. It does not laugh or weep. It rewards neither skill nor daring. It is not a trial of souls, not the measure of wills. Even less is it a tool, a means to some womanish end. It is merely the place where the iron bones of the earth meet the hollow bones of men and break them. You have offered me war, and I have accepted nothing more. I will not regret your losses. I will not bow my head before your funeral pyres. I will not rejoice at your triumphs, but I have taken the wager. I will suffer with you. I will put an end to the sword and drive their wives and children to the slaughter. And when I sleep, I will dream of their lamentations and be glad of heart." R. Scott Bakker can write. You know what I'm saying? And it's things like that. Despite how uncomfortable this book has made me, it has made me want to continue on. So I do absolutely look forward to book 2. And I hope you all join me for that. I know I went a little spiel near the end. It wasn't to preach. It wasn't to do anything other to express like a huge thought that ran through my mind as I read this book. And so I thought I'd share it with all of you. I thought it was an interesting perspective. you know, do with it what you will. I thought it was interesting. Thank you all so much for watching. Next up, we have The Warrior Prophet, Thousandfold Thought, and then a stark turnaround. We return to the Wheel of Time books by Robert Jordan. So that's for the foreseeable future. Completely different franchise, but I don't know if there's any hope in this franchise. But I will just leave you with the Vulcan phrase: live long and prosper. Till next time.